Nobody better when it comes to the business of sports, and his latest involving the SEC revenue closing in on the NCAA. That is really an interesting story. Daniel, thank you as always for joining us. I mean, we're always interested in what you have to say. I think we're a little more eager to hear what you have found this time around. Good afternoon.
It's good to be with you, Paul.
So we knew the SEC was doing well, maybe not as well as you laid out. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, of course, you're this is like preaching to the choir, talking to you about the power of the SEC here. But what struck me as interesting, I had spent the week or two diving into the tax returns of the SEC and looking at them compared to the NCAA, because there's been this sense, I think, many college sports observers have had, that there's been something recent and radical that has shaken up the power structure in college athletics, and that the NCAA has just sort of recently begun to cede some of its control. I think Mark Emmert is sort of openly advertising that he wants to give this back to the conferences. But if you look at the financial figures for the SEC and the NCAA, you really see that this has been a long time coming, that, you know, over the last 15, 20 years, the SEC has steadily gained on the NCAA in terms of annual revenue. And it's been able to do this without nearly anywhere in the ballpark of the overhead. I mean, the SEC has somewhere in like the 45 or 46 range of employees. The NCAA has 650 some. But, you know, these are very close. You know, the SEC is very close, and I think the TV deal that's set to start in 2024, 2025 is going to push it over the $1 billion revenue threshold, where it will then join the NCAA as billion-dollar college sports organizations, and that was already on pace before Texas and Oklahoma decided to join in. So this is another way of understanding how the power is shifting away from the NCAA to, you know, specifically the SEC at the conference.
Now, Daniel, just to be clear, the numbers that you're looking at, this is obviously pre-Texas and Oklahoma, because that hasn't happened yet, and it's also pre the implementation of the new ESPN SEC deal, is it not?
That's right. So I looked basically up until 2018, 2019. Obviously, last year was an outlier. The SEC and the Big Ten, for that matter, earned more revenue than the NCAA because of COVID interrupting the NCAA men's basketball tournament. But even before then, you could just see in you know, the early 2000s, the SEC was well behind the NCAA, you know, by almost like a five-fold figure in terms of annual revenue. And then in 2018, the SEC earned about $720 million in revenue, and the NCAA earned about $1.1 billion. So that's still far off, but percentage-wise, getting much closer. I mean, that's almost two-thirds of what the SEC was beginning to earn, almost two-thirds of what the NCAA earned. And again, to your point, this all predates what's going to be a huge jump in SEC revenue when the new TV deal with ESPN kicks in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to do a lot of projection. I know you're a reporter and you go through what you can get your hands on, but you've seen the numbers though, and when you add up the ESPN SEC numbers and then just make a guess on Texas and Oklahoma, I mean, we're talking about some serious money here, aren't we?
Yeah, easily over $1 billion. I mean, just back of the napkin, if they're already earning in the $700 million range, and their new TV deal is supposed to average out to about $330 million a year, I mean, that gets you pretty close to $1 billion right then and there. And again, that all was in place before Texas and Oklahoma, and the presumption would be that will only, I mean, maybe that will change the TV deal, probably only to the financial benefit of the conference, and bring on a host of other kinds of revenue. And that's sort of, you know, as the conference as compared to the National College Athletic Association, the SEC has been able to not just earn TV revenue, but it's it has a much more diversified revenue streams than the NCAA. The NCAA's revenue is almost entirely the television contract for March Madness, where the SEC has been able to earn proportionately a lot more money in terms of events, the live event revenue from its conference championships.
Daniel, and speaking of the NCAA, you mentioned their CBS Turner deal, and we didn't have the tournament a year and a half ago. But do they have any ability to increase on that, or have they reached a ceiling?
I mean, I think if I remember correctly, their TV deal is supposed to include some sort of uptick in the next couple of years, but they're kind of capped. They have a long-term TV deal that they're unlikely to be able to renegotiate for better money, at least before it expires. And again, this is all coming in the context of power shifting to conferences, and specifically to certain few elite conferences. I think right now the NCAA's prerogative is to diminish its overhead, and this is something that the SEC has been able to, and other conferences have been able to earn their revenue without the liabilities and the financial consequences. I mean, you look at this just simply through legal expenditures that the NCAA has incurred versus the SEC. Since 2010, or I should say between 2010 and 2018, the NCAA spent almost $250 million on legal expenditures. The SEC spent $12 million. So even though the SEC is getting closer and closer in terms of revenue, they have not dealt with the same sort of liabilities or overhead as the NCAA.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.